it's another salvaged wood haul.
And this isn't your run-of-the-mill oak. I'm pretty sure this is solid elm.
Well, all apart from these pieces of cornice, which are MDF with a laminate applied. The first job is to get these materials processed. And at this point I wrote down all of the dimensions and quantities so that I can figure out what to make. And my first idea was to make some kind of wall hanging unit, but with lots of curves. And I'll start by preparing these two long lengths, which unfortunately were the only two longer pieces that I had to work with. And I'll sand away the wood finish first, so that I don't damage the blades in my planer. With the finish removed, I'm starting to think this looks more like ash than elm, although I'm not totally sure. Also, some of it had a yellow colour like the piece on the left, others were more kind of greyish brown like the piece on the right. These may even be two different species, I'm not sure. But anyway, this means I'll need to do some work getting the colours more consistent when it comes to finishing later. Now I want to remove these rounded over parts. After a soak in some soapy water, these handles are cleaned up nicely. I'm not a fan of them though, so I doubt I'll ever use them, and if they're of use to anyone watching, please drop me an email. Now, I only have 2 of these long pieces, but ideally I needed 3, so I'm going to use 3 shorter pieces to make up the length, and I had a bit of a plan in my head for how I can hide the end grain butt joins later on. I'm just going to mark up a centre line with the middle of those 3 pieces centred. Then I can get everything glued up. To get these butt joins aligned properly, I'll just clamp on a block above and below. And I did several other glue ups of just 2 boards. And then I can start shaping the narrower boards. The back of this board is the one that was made up of 3 pieces, so I'm going to position these so that they hide the joins. So if I position these and then measure the distance between, that gives me the measurement I need to cut my next boards. For the joinery here, I'm going to use dowels. And using the drill block will ensure my holes are nice and straight. Once the glue has cured, I can drill out the holes to full depth and add some of these 6mm dowels. I'm also going to be using dowels for the next piece of joinery, but this time 8mm dowels. And I made these dowels myself using this dowel making jig, which works brilliantly. This top piece is the one that's going to be joined with dowels, but before I fit that, I'm going to glue and screw the identical bottom piece. These screws will be hidden when the next bit gets added. And now I just need to drill out the corresponding holes for the dowels in the bottom of this piece. Rounding over the end of the dowels makes them easier to knock in and creates a bit of space for the glue. Here I'm just experimenting a bit with finishes. I have some shellac, which is going to act as a carrier for some of this medium oak dye. This will help the dye to apply evenly, so there's no blotchiness. It will seal things up and dry really quickly, and it will help to disguise those colour differences in the timber. And this came out a bit darker than I wanted, so I just added more shellac. This mixture raised the wood grain a bit, so I denibbed with some 400 grit wet and dry paper. And then I applied a top coat of 3 coats of Danish oil. And as you can see, the end grain really took a lot of that finish in, so I just kept reapplying until I built up a nice sheen.
Right, that finish is nice and dry now, and next I just need to figure out how I'm going to mount this. I do have some of these button fixings, and I really like these. But these are quite a bit wider than the boards that I used, so I'd need to mount some cleats to the underside of the shelves to secure them to, and I don't really want that kind of look. I want this to look sleek and minimal. So I think I'm going to use some of these keyhole plates instead.
And here you can see how these keyhole plates work. Just by the way, in my next video, I'll be making another project to use up the rest of this timber, so please stay tuned to the channel.
Now I just have to very carefully measure the distance between the 2 plates.
I want to position it central to this wall above the chest of drawers, which by the way I also made, and it was a previous video on this channel.